Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. Commissioner, good to see you. Good to see you.
Morning. Nice to see you, sir. How are you? How you doing?
Good. How are you? Yeah, seriously.
It's okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Congressman Richie Torres, and I'm proud to be joined by a number of leaders in our city. We're joined by officials from the FDNY, including the Commissioner, Laura Kavanagh, the Bronx Borough President, Vanessa Gibson, Councilmember Oswald Felice, and the Borough President, the Councilmember, and I, about a year ago, founded the Federal, State, and City Task Force on Fire Safety here in the Bronx in the wake of the fire at Twin Parks Northwest. So fire safety is an issue that is a priority for the elected officials here in the Bronx. We're here to address a mounting crisis not only in our city, but throughout our country. Lithium-ion batteries have increasingly become a common cause of fires, and nowhere more so than in New York City, which has been the hardest hit. The statistics speak for themselves. In New York City, we have seen more than 400 lithium-ion battery fires over the course of 4 years. In 2022 alone, we saw more than 200 fires. And the number of fires caused by lithium-ion batteries has not just risen, it has grown exponentially. From 30 in 2019 to 44 in 2020 to 104 in 2021 to 220 fires in 2022. We know that these batteries can easily overheat, and upon overheating can burst into flames, causing not just a fire, but an explosion. These are among the easiest fires to start and spread rapidly, and among the hardest to extinguish. And in order to understand the scale and speed of the destruction that these battery fires can cause, look no further than 2096 Grand Concourse, where a supermarket and a laundromat were reduced to rubble, where an electric scooter caused by a lithium-ion battery set off a fire that was so explosive and so aggressive that it required a response from more than 200 firefighters. And we want to thank the FDNY for the heroism and the courage it has shown in the service of public safety. Now, these lithium-ion batteries are known to power everyday devices like cars and cell phones and laptops, and especially electronic mobility devices like electric bikes and electric scooters. And I want to be crystal clear, the problem are not the batteries per se. The problem arises when these lithium-ion batteries are poorly designed, poorly manufactured, and poorly handled. The fire hazard of these batteries depends on how manufacturers make them and how consumers use them. And so as far as I'm concerned, the scandal is not that the federal government is failing to regulate the safety of these batteries. The scandal is that the federal government is not even trying. At the federal level, there are no safety regulators or safety regulations when it comes to lithium-ion batteries. Even though lithium-ion batteries and e-mobility bikes have become a common form of transportation for food delivery workers, neither the National Highway Traffic Administration nor the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, OSHA, neither one of those agencies have a role in regulating these bikes. And even though you have a nationally recognized testing laboratory like UL that has developed safety standards, compliance with those standards is purely voluntary. And voluntary standards can only take us so far. And so I'm here to announce that I'm introducing legislation that would require the Consumer Product Safety Commission to set mandatory standards for the design and manufacturing of e-mobility devices like e-bikes and e-scooters that rely on these lithium-ion batteries. We must hold manufacturers accountable for producing safer devices and safer batteries. We must hold online marketplaces accountable for preventing the sale of dangerous bikes and dangerous devices. And we must hold Customs and Border Patrol at DHS accountable for preventing the importation of these dangerous devices and dangerous e-mobility devices. My legislation, which would mandate safety standards for these e-mobility devices, is an expression of government's highest obligation, which is public safety. We have an obligation to keep people safe in their homes and in their workplaces and to protect them from the devastating fires that we have seen far too often here in the Bronx and elsewhere in the city. And I want to thank the FDNY and the Commissioner for her leadership in sounding the alarm about the fire hazards of poorly manufactured lithium-ion batteries and the e-mobility devices that contain these batteries. So without further ado, I want to invite the Commissioner to say a few remarks.
Thank you, Congressmember. As the Congressmember mentioned, this is an emerging threat here in New York City. We have seen a quadrupling in e-bike fires just in the last few months alone. We are incredibly concerned about the damage they can cause, the loss of life that it can cause, and the danger it faces our first responders who are seeing an incredible volume of fire upon arrival. And these e-bikes are also toxic, and so what is actually burning at a fire has long-term consequences for our first responders. So as I've said many times before, we have to come at this from every angle: federal, city, state, regulation, education, outreach. This is an urgent issue, and we have to attack it in every way we possibly can. So I am incredibly grateful that I have my federal and city partners here. They have been in the community with me all week doing outreach, and thanks to this legislation, we think we will see eventually fewer of these illegal devices coming into our city. So we are incredibly grateful for doing this work, and I cannot emphasize the urgency of the issue enough. As you can just see here to our right, the amount of damage a single bike can cause is incredible. Thank you.
In the wake of the fire at Twin Parks Northwest, I partnered with our Borough President, Vanessa Gibson, to create the first ever federal, state, and local task force on fire safety. And we're expanding the scope of the task force to include lithium-ion batteries and e-mobility devices. And I just want to thank the Borough President for her leadership.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to thank Congressman Richie Torres and his team for their incredible commitment and leadership in introducing the Setting Consumer Standards for Lithium-Ion Batteries Act at the federal level. This is truly a call to action and attention. I have a sense of nostalgia being here because last Sunday, March 5th, early morning on a Sunday, many of us are at church and in other places. We learned a little after 11 a.m. that there was a raging fire here on the Grand Concourse in the Fordham community. And it brought back a sense of emotion for me because January 9, 2022 was also a Sunday morning, and I was also at church when I learned about the horrific five-alarm residential fire at Twin Parks Northwest. We have seen far too many fires that have devastated families, displaced our communities, and certainly commercial fires that have displaced employees and workers and really destroyed many of our neighborhood institutions. Right here on the Grand Concourse, a laundromat and a food market plaza providing local jobs and valuable services has devastated this Fordham community. And many of the residents that I talked to last Sunday when I was here on scene with elected officials and our FDNY Commissioner and Mayor Eric Adams were all here. And the most important thing that many of the residents were saying, Ms. Gibson, we have to do something about these lithium-ion batteries. It is unacceptable that it is no fault of our own that we are displaced because of others' actions. We know that our delivery and food delivery workers use these e-bikes and e-scooters, and we just want to be safe. What are we going to do to regulate these e-bikes and e-scooters and the associated batteries? And that is the reason why we are here today. I want to commend the FDNY, our Commissioner Laura Kavanagh, our Chief of Department, our Borough Chief, and everyone at the FDNY for their incredible efforts every single day protecting New Yorkers. Just on Sunday, over 200 firefighters responded to this emergency right here on the Grand Concourse. The NYPD, our partners at the 4-6 precinct, were here. our partners at Emergency Management, the Department of Buildings and HPD and Small Business Services, Mayor's Office, everyone was here. It was truly a hands-on deck effort. You saw the flames engulfing as far as Fordham Road when I was traveling from the east side. That's how bad this fire was. And we worried about the neighboring residential building, the residents on Anthony Avenue and Ryer Avenue. And so I want to thank the FDNY and all of our first responders and essential workers for your incredible efforts. Even in this fire, we are grateful that there were no fatalities, but we had a number of firefighters injured as well as a Con Edison worker, and we continue to pray for them. We know that the answer to this is education and outreach and regulation. We do not want to disrupt our food delivery workers and their everyday work, but we want to make sure that people are safe in doing it. Introducing legislation at the federal level will give us the protections that we need, and that is the reason why we're here today. I also want to acknowledge that just last week, on March 2nd, led by our Speaker, Adrian Adams, and the New York City Council, and Councilmember Oswald Felice, the chair of our committee, passed important legislation codifying the regulation of these lithium batteries. And we're urging Mayor Eric Adams to please sign these bills into law expeditiously, because we want to make sure that we are doing our part. I also want to commend the FDNY. As I was here on Sunday talking to our commissioner and officials, we learned more about a lot of the site visits that FDNY is conducting in commercial businesses, talking to our landlords and our owners, because we realize not everyone knows the rules, and we want to make sure that people are educated. We're going into immigrant communities. We have been hosting fire safety and education forums across the Bronx because we've had far too many fires. 2 weeks ago, another 5-alarm fire, another supermarket destroyed on University and Tremont in the Morris Heights community. So this is an urgent issue that we are tackling at every front. We also know that we will be working with our state colleagues. I want to recognize Assemblymember Udelka Tapia, who's going to work with us, work with our congressman and our council member on introducing legislation at the state level. We will leave no stone unturned when it comes to protecting our residents and our families in this borough and in this city. And so once again, I want to thank our Congressman Richie Torres for his leadership. This Fire Education and Safety Task Force that we assembled last year continues to do this work, whether we have a fire or not. This is ongoing. And so I am grateful as the borough president to work with these incredible partners, and once again to all of our city officials. Thank you. You are reassuring New Yorkers that not only do we care, but we are going to do something about it. No more fires, no more fatalities, no more disruptions of businesses and families being displaced. We will get this work done now to protect every resident and every family across our city. Thank you so much.
There has been no greater champion of fire safety in the New York City Council than my council member Oswald Felice. The City Council, under his leadership, has passed legislation on the issue of fires caused by lithium-ion batteries. So the council has taken action, and it's time for the United States Congress to do the same. Oswald?
Thank you, Oswald.
Thank you so much, Congressmember. I want to start by thanking our firefighters. A few days ago, we saw a powerful fire, and we saw hundreds of firefighters putting their own lives at risk to make sure that this fire was controlled. So I want to thank our fire department for their heroic work. I also want to thank our wonderful Congressmember for his incredible leadership. Fire safety continues to be a problem affecting the city of New York, but especially the borough of the Bronx. So I want to thank you, Congressmember, and you, Borough President, as well, for your leadership. A few days ago, we lost our local neighborhood supermarket in a powerful fire that was caused by a lithium-ion battery. And that we saw was just another example of the serious fire safety threats that these batteries pose. That we saw a few days ago, that was only another example. Last year, we had approximately 220 examples, nearly 220 fires in 365 days. That's about a fire every 36 hours. 220 fires, destroying our businesses, destroying our homes, and leaving all of us worse off. We actually had a case in Harlem where a young 5-year-old even lost her life. A 5-year-old losing her life due to a fire caused by these lithium-ion batteries. It is clear that we need regulation. And in the City Council last week, we passed legislation to make sure that these batteries go through safety checks, fire safety checks, and certification before they're sold to New Yorkers, given the realities that we continue to see almost every single day. We also passed additional legislation prohibiting the sale of refurbished lithium-ion batteries because we know that sometimes they're improperly refurbished and that creates new fire safety problems. But we need additional action. We need action at the federal level. This is a problem affecting the city of New York, the state of New York as well, and also affecting every region in our entire country. Every single part of our country is struggling with this. We have regulations for the cars that we build. We have regulations for the cleaning supplies that we use. We have regulations for the food that we consume. We know that these lithium-ion batteries are creating serious fire safety challenges for all of us. So I want to thank you, Congressmember, for leading at the federal level and making sure that the products that are being sold to anyone in our country are safe for our people to use. So I want to thank you, Congressmember and Borough President of the FDNY, for everything you're doing to resolve the fire safety challenges that we're seeing almost on a daily basis. And briefly, in Spanish, le quiero dar las gracias a nuestro Departamento de Fuego. Hace varios días nosotros vimos un incendio extremadamente poderoso que destruyó un supermercado de nuestra comunidad. Y le quiero dar las gracias a todos nuestros bomberos por arriesgar su vida para asegurar que este fuego no sea peor de lo que nosotros vimos. Nosotros hemos visto más de 220 incendios por batería de litios en menos de un año. La semana pasada nosotros vimos solamente otro ejemplo del peligro que estas baterías causan. La semana pasada nosotros pasamos legislación al nivel de la ciudad para regular estas baterías y para asegurar que solamente las baterías seguras sean vendidas. Pero es extremadamente claro que necesitamos regulación al nivel federal porque hemos visto el mismo problema en todos los diferentes estados. Muchas de estas baterías, no todas, pero muchas, son peligrosas y tenemos que asegurar que tengamos regulaciones para proteger a nuestros residentes. And also, last but not least, I also want to say that all of us here are 1,000% aware that 65,000 delivery workers rely on these batteries for work. We're going to be working with them in the City Council. We are working on a battery swap program so they could be able to trade in their uncertified and their unsafe batteries, trade them in for certified batteries. We're still developing that program, and that is going to be a top priority for this City Council. We're going to be working with them. Our delivery workers help our city operate. We have their backs, and we just want to ensure that they are safe and their families are safe as well. We're going to be working with them to create a system that works for everyone, including the delivery workers and our entire city. Thank you so much.
Even though the FDNY has educated the public about the proper handling of these lithium-ion battery-powered e-mobility devices, it should not only fall on consumers to use them properly, it should fall on manufacturers to produce them more safely. And so that is the purpose of our legislation. I also think it's worth emphasizing that these fires are a reminder that New York is often a tale of two cities. The highest income New Yorkers can easily afford UL certified e-mobility devices, whereas the lowest income New Yorkers, often delivery workers, are buying these dangerous devices that burst into flames. And no delivery worker should have to choose between his life or his livelihood, between his employment and his safety. So with that said, we'd be happy to take whatever questions you have. So.
For the fire commissioner, you mentioned at the outset of quadrupling in these incidents over the last period of months. Do you attribute that to anything in particular? Is it what the congressman talked about, the availability, people just buying it on Amazon, or what led to the recent spike?
Yeah, we believe it's the availability, and then just the sheer number of deliveries happening in a city like New York, and that these are very easy to buy, as the Congress member mentioned, and often it's hard to tell the difference between one that's certified and one that's not.
I also, if you can actually, I think it's a perfect storm. I think it's the rise of e-commerce. Mm-hmm. It's the rise of app-based food delivery, especially during the pandemic. And with a whole new industry comes a new wave of food delivery workers who rely on these e-mobility devices as a mode of transportation. And then less known, there was a 2016 law, a change in federal law, that exempts imports below $800 from inspection and tariffs. So many of these e-mobility devices, which were manufactured outside the United States, which fall below the $800 threshold, undergo no inspection. So we've been flooded with these cheap e-mobility devices. Do you want to?
So Underwriters Laboratory is a nonprofit group that has long studied consumer electronics and ensured that they meet basic safety standards. So that's considered sort of the gold standard for consumer product safety is UL certification, whether it's on an e-bike or on an electrical outlet or power strip.
It's voluntary because only the federal government can set mandatory safety standards, and there's no safety regulator. So even though, like the National Highway Traffic Administration, which regulates motorcycles, has no role in regulating these e-mobility devices. OSHA, which regulates workplace safety, has no role, even though these are used by workers. And so we've concluded that the best way forward is to empower the Consumer Product Safety Commission to set mandatory standards that would bind every manufacturer in the United States.
So would your bill do that?
Yes. Sorry? There's no obligation to comply with them. And when you comply with these standards, it's much more expensive. So unless you require them, businesses often have no incentive to comply with them.
I think it's also worth mentioning that even in some cases, if they are not in compliance with a local law, that as the Congressmember mentioned, they're flooding into the city, and once they're here, it's much harder to find them, and often those using them don't know that they're not certified devices, and so it's really essential to have both city and federal regulation to make sure that when we find a device and it's not certified, we can remove it, but also that they're not making it here in the first place, they're not being sold on these online retailers, that they're not making it through the ports to be available, in thousands of them that are coming into the city every day.
When it comes to fake batteries or replicas, how your legislation is trying to tackle this? Because we know, so delivery workers say, some batteries are more like last longer or have more, let's say, strength power than others. So how does it tackle education?
If I understand, look, we would empower the Consumer Product Safety Commission to finally set safety standards, but those standards are only as good as the enforcement. And so we have to hold online marketplaces like Amazon accountable for preventing the sale of these dangerous devices and batteries. We have to ensure that Customs and Border Patrol are preventing the import of these dangerous batteries. So it's not just about setting the standards, it's about enforcing those standards and mobilizing multiple agencies, including the private sector. We need the Amazons of the world to police their own platform. I don't know if anyone wants to add.
The companies like Grubhub and Uber Eats that have these workers that know that they are using these devices, are you looking at them as well?
My view is those companies should be part of the solution because as far as I'm concerned, these e-mobility devices are often workplace devices. And companies like Grubhub and Uber should have a stake in the occupational health and safety of their workers. So I do believe that there's a role for them. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
Yeah, I can add to that.
Especially from the city council.
Yeah, absolutely. In the city council, we're developing a program to create that battery swap program. There's a lot of different ways that we could go about that. One way is creating a public funds trust. Another way is by helping, by working with these big companies, Grubhub, DoorDash, so that they could also help contribute to the resolution of this problem. And also, third way that we're discussing is creating a surcharge where people who are purchasing products, deliveries, and etc., we add a surcharge so that we could use that fund to fund these certified batteries for the workers. So yes, something that we're definitely talking about in the city council.
Congressman, it seems like your proposal
might take some time, but
Yeah.
in Washington to get it approved. So what is the most important message is, to the public, or to, these important leaders that are involved in trying to find a solution to take right now in the meantime, right? What do we tell the public? What can we do? Because it's an ongoing problem.
Well, look, I think our message is that Congress will act, but before we act, there are steps that we can take to prevent these fires. So I would encourage members of the public to only purchase e-mobility devices that are UL certified, that have the safety label. We've all seen the UL certification in consumer goods, and nowhere is it more important than when it comes to these e-mobility bikes, because we've seen the massive fires that can be unleashed. But we also call upon the manufacturers, rather than wait for legislation from Congress, take it upon yourself to manufacture e-mobility devices that's certified to the UL standard. And so that would be my message to manufacturers and to consumers.
We have one more here.
In the cases of the batteries that have started fires here in the city, what do those batteries have in common? Were they all not well certified? Were any of them the correct batteries that should have been used with that device?
So it's different in every case, but overwhelmingly we see the devices that catch fire being either non-certified devices or devices that have been tampered with in some way. The battery has been opened up, maybe it's not using its original charger, but in almost all cases we are seeing either that they're not certified or that there was some aftermarket tampering with the devices. We know that that's the most dangerous situation for any bike. Sometimes they're trying to produce new batteries or even stronger batteries with additional charge time, and so they'll actually open up the batteries and actually swap them to other folks. Some local businesses are doing like battery charging or battery swaps, but often they're with old batteries, and once batteries are damaged or tampered with, they're significantly more likely to catch fire.
I'm just wondering, is there come up, and I'm sorry if you did, is there an interim step people can take where they park them outside? Because isn't the issue is the indoor storage and the combustion? So, wouldn't it be a good protocol if you're not sure about what kind of battery you have to lock it outside?
Yeah, so as the Congressmember mentioned, regulation is key here, and we'd ask the manufacturers to work with us in this interim period. But what I can say from the fire department perspective is if you have one of these bikes, please do not charge it when you are not watching it, and please do not charge it in an area in your home that is between you and getting out of your home. If you can charge it outside, that is ideal, but as we know, as New Yorkers, not many of us have outdoor space, and so what we'd really ask is if you have a device at home and you're not sure whether it's a safe device, but you need to be using it for work, please make sure it is not between you and your exit. That is the main way to save lives and to save firefighter lives as well.
Last question over here.
Do you all want manufacturers held accountable when these devices are being sold to people that maybe have been refurbished or they're not aware of the hazards, and then they lead to destruction of businesses or homes? Who do you think should be held accountable?
I mean, our view is that it should be illegal to manufacture dangerous lithium-ion batteries and dangerous devices that contain those batteries. And if you fail to comply with the law, you should be held accountable. That's the manufacturers. I think the manufacturers are the root cause of the problem, as far as I'm concerned. It's a problem that has multiple dimensions, but the root cause are the manufacturers.
I think can I just say it's worth mentioning that our fire marshals and the sheriff, if you want to talk about it, have done some inspections and sweeps of local businesses recently to confiscate these devices.
Good morning. Yeah, we've teamed with the sheriffs and other local agencies to conduct sweeps with these businesses that are conducting unsafe practices. So we've found some egregious violations of the fire code, which does regulate this on a small basis at this time, and we've been able to go to these stores and mitigate those problems as well. But I applaud our elected officials to raise awareness and conduct some more legislation that would prohibit these dangerous practices. But we have been going out every day, visiting these stores, not only to conduct enforcement, but education. I think a lot of the stores don't realize some of the practices they're engaged in are dangerous. So we want them. We're not looking to hammer small businesses over this. We want people just to be safe. We want our residents to be safe and understand what is causing these problems and also the fire code as it exists.
Okay, everybody, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yeah.
¿Le puedo hacer una preguntita?